Welcome back to another episode of Reynolds Runabouts with Jeffrey Reynolds. This week I spent some time working on my floor panels, a little bit of electrical installation, and the final preparation for putting the bilge paint into the bilge before turning it over and doing the fairing. When I started working on this boat, I decided that even though there was no floor in the boat, that I was not going to put a permanent floor in. The boats from this era typically were removable. If anything, they were maybe screwed down or nailed down, and you could at least take the screws out. Today's boats, obviously, they're meant with fiberglass floors, and then, most of the time foam is put in there as well. So not only does the bilge, is it full of foam and it's safe, but it does trap water and moisture, and you can't air them out. Historically, Chris Crafts, you were able to take your floorboards out, and they wanted you to, so you could air out that bilge every, summer and fall. You stored them open so that they would dry out. Same concept with me. I want to be able to access the bilge if I drop something down there, but I also want to be able to dry it out and inspect it periodically to make sure the stringers and the floor and everything are fine. And so what I did, I didn't have a floor when I started, but I had a basic idea. I just took an outline of the floor and I cut it into several pieces. I have one right here, the main floor for the front cockpit. It's one piece. It comes out in the rear cockpit, or the second cockpit. There are two pieces because it's just so hard to get it out if you don't. And then behind the back seat, where the gas tanks and battery are stored, there's also two removable boards there as well. And so what I did is I made them out of 1/2-inch exterior plywood, and then I soaked them abundantly in Smith's clear penetrating epoxy, CPES, and then I painted the underside already, and this is the top. I just took a countersink, and I made a countersink hole into the stringers where I want them. So now I have my stainless steel fastener, flathead, tapered going in, and then once it gets into the stringer, I'm mounting what they call a blind post. And these blind posts come like this. Some people call these T-nuts. I am cut the top or the bottom off, and I'm going to drop that into the stringer with the epoxy thickened, and it'll sit in there, and then I will use these screws that I bought. Stainless steel will go through the floorboard and into that post and attach, so that I will always have the ability to pull that floor off, and these posts won't let water into that stringer because it'll have thickened epoxy around it and it'll be seated in there. So I hope that this is the answer to all my dreams for not ruining my new stringers. So in the last video clip, you saw me using Smith's CPES, clear penetrating epoxy sealer. There's an A and a B, and you mix them equal parts, 1-to-1, and you put them in a container like this, measured or otherwise, and give it 100 strokes or 2 minutes of stirring, and then you use a chip brush like this, disposable, because it will not be any good when you're done. And I brushed on the sealer 4 times is what I counted until I ran out, because I thought I had enough in it. It looked like it when I went away last night. The wood was saturated looking. That's what you want. You want all the dry spots to be gone. And it looked like it was saturated. Some of the rules to follow when using Smiths is mandatory eye protection. You want to use a respirator with a charcoal filter. the stuff is quite noxious and probably not good for your lungs. If you can smell it through your mask, your charcoal filter is probably bad or your mask isn't tight. You want to make sure it's tight. And then use 7 to 9 mil gloves because it'll go through anything thinner. And use a disposable brush that you can throw away. And like I said, I just went around and around 4 times with all these pieces on every edge, every surface, and then left the flat surfaces in the pool of sealer that I had on the plastic here. And if you leave a pool and lay the part into it, it'll hopefully absorb some of your product and use it. I use 5 mil plastic. It will not stick to the part. You'll get maybe some waves that you have to sand out anyways before you paint. Another great thing about this product is that you can put it on one day, and if you are within the 8 to 12 hour period, it'll still be tacky, and you can put your paint on it, and it will adhere better because of the stickiness. These parts, if I don't get the sticky, period correct, I'll probably give it a light sand and then put my epoxy bilge paint. My rule in using Smiths is anything below the floorboards. So my floorboards and any of my seat supports that are dipping into the bilge, my bilge pump pad, which will mount to the bottom of the hull and the stern, that also got epoxied. These parts were epoxied before I even glued them together with 3M 5200 glue. So the insides have it already, and then I went around and did it again, just so that the outsides are even more protected. I made sure the Smiths go down into the pre-drilled screw holes, so they're way down inside the wood. You could even use like a hypodermic to get more down there. I noticed that that was really going through there well and dripping out the bottom, so I knew I was covered. And today I still have a few little dry spots. Usually the edge of the plywood where it's absorbing is sometimes is dry, so you do it again. So tonight before I leave, because this stuff stinks so bad, that I will go ahead and put another coat on this and a couple of parts in the bilge that have to be done yet, and just walk away and let it off gas all night and cook. And when I come in the morning, it's usually not too bad. Your ventilation, depending on your building, and I had a smaller shop, I ran a wall unit to take the smell out, which is a good idea. Especially, like I don't use an open flame in my heating system, so I'm very comfortable that the heat in here will do it. If you're doing it in an area where you're a little suspicious of maybe open flame and maybe an explosion, which you should be aware of, you need to heat your room up considerably, like into the 80 area, and then shut it off, and then you can go ahead and do your Smiths, and it should be fine. Something I'm trying on this boat that I've never done before is to put the floorboards in, but instead of driving wood screws through the boards, which are countersunk, so they're flat, I am putting holes into the stringers, which are fur, and I'm worried about getting water in there. So what I'm going to do, I'm using, just using epoxy, and I'm squeezing it into the hole. And what I did is I bought these little, they're called T-post or post, that usually they go through one side of a project, and then there's another flathead on the other side. I cut the bottom off. This is just an example of what they look like. I cut that off, and then I drilled my holes so that they're perfect at that height. So I've got a, this thing that has a screw shaft in it that I can put my countersunk stainless steel screws through the floorboard. It'll go into this post and screw down tight, which are then attached to my stringers. And what I do is I take the epoxy and I squirt it in the hole with my hypodermic. I kind of have an idea how much to put in from just testing, and I can see it. And then I take that post, which has a little bit of a rough edge because when I cut it off, and then I just pound that in. Careful not to take it down all the way, because I don't want any extra epoxy going up into that screw, which would then not allow me to put my countersunk bolt in there. And now I've got a nice post in there. I never have to worry about wearing out that stringer with a wood screw, which I've seen in other wood boats that I've worked on. So this should give me a good waterproof solution to the stringers, and also give me, I think, a better secure fit for my floorboards through the life of the boat. So here's a closer example of what I start with. It's called a T-post. It's made out of aluminum, so that'll give me the rust prevention I want. It's still, I've tested it. It works really well with my stainless steel countersunk bolts. And what I do is I just take these nippers, and I know the depth is what I've already drilled. So I just, with your safety glasses on, just work my way around this aluminum, which is, you know, soft enough where it will snap. So what you have is, you know, this blunt end. It's a little rough, but it's going to be in the epoxy. I left enough room in that epoxy pocket, so it'll be all the way around it and on the bottom. It does not have a hole in the bottom, so it's just the shaft. So the screw will be safe from the epoxy, and I will have no water intrusion even from the screw down. So I'm hoping this is something I use going forward. Yesterday, as you saw in the video, I used TotalBoat's TotalBilge epoxy bilge paint for my, this is my motor shifter mount. These are the two rear seat bench seat supports, and then I've got my two front seat supports as well. I use this because it is resistant to just about anything that'll go into the bilge, from water to oil to acids to beer, pop. It's just really bulletproof stuff. I've already put one coat in my boat a few years ago, and I did some final sanding, and I'll do another coat inside the bilge all the way up to the upholstery and right under the deck, so that the inside of the boat will totally have TotalBilge epoxy paint up on the sides and on the bottom. It shouldn't have any issues. You have to use a respirator mask with a charcoal filter. It's I'm not sure it's toxic, but it smells really bad. It's not as bad as Smith's CPES, but it has a pretty strong odor. That's probably the epoxy working. So again, I work on it late in the day, and then I leave the building with my mask on, and you know, let it cook all night. And I came in this morning, it's hard. It's got a little bit of, I wouldn't say a tack, but feels like it's almost like pliable, like rubber almost. And that'll get harder over time. I've noticed with the Bilge it did that. So what I'll do is I'll give this a light sand to take out some of the imperfections, you know, here and there a piece of dust or something got in, and then I'll go ahead and give it a final coat just before I do the bilge, and then everything will be nice and white. I probably will do the top side of the shifter to match the vinyl and the other parts of the boat, the Alexio paint, and I can go right over that. And then I'm going to do my floorboards as well, so I'll have a really tough paint surface on my floorboards, and I know it will be super waterproof and super durable for years to come. As you saw from the previous time lapse, I spent some time putting on my first coat of TotalBilge Bilge paint on the top of my floor panels. I will now finish that boat painting when I receive the paint that goes on the side of the boat, which I'll be getting from Alexial. So what I want to do is try to match the whites, both interior and exterior. And because Alexial is also an epoxy-based paint, it will be my second coat on here, and it'll help fill in some of these plywood cracks. Even though I sealed it and faired it, there's always going to be some areas in the plywood that didn't fill. So that second coat and maybe a third coat of the Alexial will help fill in those. And then I will have a really nice set of panels for my floorboards that will have, you can take them in and out easily. They'll be secured to the stringers, and they will have a really nice coat of epoxy paint to help preserve them, not only against moisture in the air, but also water that would, inevitably comes in a boat when people are getting in and out. This week I also put my motor on the boat. This is a 1962/63. You can't really tell. The serial numbers are pointing heavily towards 1962 just because there's a group that fell within 1962. It's a Merc 500, which makes it a 50 horse. It was not original to the boat, but it was the last known motor on this boat when it was separated from the trailer and the boat. And I was successful in getting this motor back from the last true owner. And then I did the teeny trailer, which I will be covering in future episodes and how to restore that, and the boat. So even though the motor and the boat don't match, it has history, so I kept them together. One of the things that I discovered when putting this boat back together was the incredible lack of space in getting under this deck. This is what they call a splash well or an engine well, and it's self-bailing, meaning water ships in over the stern, or you stop too quickly, these little boats, the water or the waves will follow you and into the boat. So it's good to have a self-bailing engine well, which is what this is. And there's a drain plug there behind the motor. Back to access. I knew that I did not want to put this engine well in permanently because I knew that someday the cables would have to be switched or something where I would have to get access. And it's hard enough to get under this when there's not an engine well in. I can't imagine what it would be like without it. So what I did, I decided to make a removable engine well that will ship water pretty efficiently, but also allow me access in the future should I need it. And this is what I did. I took the pattern that I found in the Bilge and I just patterned it, but I didn't make it permanent. I used magnets. So I need to get into this lower area. I don't put batteries or gas tanks or anything under here, but what I did is I made hinges. I bought hinges that allow me to take the floor out the sides are on magnets, so they move. And what you can do, move them out, and it gives you direct access to the pulleys that are under the deck and the anchors on which they're mounted, which allow the tension on the outboard motor to be accurate. And then it leads up on both sides of the boat to the steering column. And what I'm going to do is put little rubber gasket strips on the bottom of those, and that will keep it a little more watertight. But overall, a lot of water coming in is going to immediately find its way to that drain plug, and I will be able to pull a lot of water out. I'll also be installing a bilge pump, and that will go through another through-hole fitting, they call it, below the engine well, but above the water line. It's never good to pump water into an engine well from your bilge. You want to get it out of the boat, not maybe help it stay in the boat. So I'll be doing that as well. That'll be an addition. This boat didn't have a lot of safety features on it. It had probably a fire extinguisher, some flares and a horn and a life preserver for each passenger. That would be it. I've installed a new bilge pump. I'm putting in a master battery switch, and I'm putting in a fused bus to add more safety to it, as well as moving the gas tanks farther forward so that you can get to them if you have to and not spill gas. And the battery will be right under this hatch, so it'll be very accessible for the owner. And the seats will come out. The back seat will come forward, and you can have ready access in there to get to the gas tanks again, so you don't have to fill through this little hatch. The hatch is more of decoration, but it does give you nice access when you need it in a hurry. So that I will retain. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe button and like button if you liked it. Over the next few weeks, I'll be traveling a little bit, so I'm probably going to move to at least a 2-week, if not 3-week time period between videos. Also, I'm entering into a time on the project where there's a lot of waiting between surfaces drying, meaning varnish and paint. So the videos will be getting, spread out a little bit more too because of that. You can only put on so much high build varnish and then have to wait. And then there's a lot of boring sanding in between. So I won't bore you with some of that. I will keep you up to date to show you some of the progress as I go between the applications of the varnish and the paint, and then the sanding and how to do that well to get it nice and flat. And it'll be coming to a conclusion in the next few months, but I'm going to have to spread the videos out a little bit to keep it interesting for you. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in a few weeks.